the president of the university system, Dr. Jeffrey Gold. We appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us.
It's a great pleasure to be with you. Really excited tonight.
So you just hit your 100 days a little while ago. Let's talk a little about how it's been, and anything surprised you in this new job?
You know, after more than 10 years of being the chancellor at the Med Center, 4 years being the chancellor at UNO, and 3 years of being the provost and executive vice president, you'd think I'd have a pretty good idea about what the presidency of the university would be like. But I will tell you, the last 100 days has been absolutely amazing. The people I've gotten to meet, you know, I've crisscrossed the state over and over, and Nebraskans are so proud of this great university. And of course, we're winning, and that always helps.
Dr. Gold, you also now sit on the Big Ten Council of Chancellors and Presidents and represent Nebraska on that. How has that transition been to kind of represent Nebraska, and obviously a very big part of the university?
Well, it's a very important part of the job now, and it's really been a pleasure to work with Tony Petitti and to work with the Council of Presidents and Chancellors. You know, there's a lot going on, as I'm sure our audience knows, with all of the NIL negotiations and settlements, and that will have a profound effect on all of intercollegiate athletics, starting most likely this coming spring when contracts are going to be issued. And getting the presidents and chancellors together of the Big Ten is an important thing, and I think there's a lot of good cohesion right now.
Dr. Gold, one of the big conversations about AAU and Nebraska getting back into it. Where are we now with that in the negotiations?
Well, the Association of American Universities, the AAU, is an elite group of 71 universities, 2 Canadian universities, 69 American universities, that UNL was a member of until 2011. And since that time, we've not been. And the focus now is trying to do everything we can to get back in. And the goal of this, the destination is academic excellence. And it's all about research productivity. It's all about awards and recognition of faculty. You know, I'm told, I just had several weeks ago a meeting in Washington with the executive director, and this could be as long as a 10-year process.
Wow.
And so, you know, the clock is ticking, but it's not going to be tomorrow.
Gotcha.
Dr. Gold, you mentioned earlier NIL, revenue sharing, new steps are being taken to go into place for 2025. What steps has the athletic department and university taken to make sure Nebraska is in the best situation possible to attack and be at the top when those new rules come into play?
Yeah, well, you know, I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for Troy Dannon. I think he's the right person at the right time to be our AD. He's working very closely with the Big Ten ADs, and they're very tightly aligned about this as well. But, you know, this is going to mean not only a retroactive settlement for the 5-year period, but it's going to mean revenue sharing for the future. The cap's going to be about $22.5 million. And it's going to require a very different mindset. It's going to essentially convert student athletes into employees. And, you know, they'll get 1099s and W-2s like anybody who parks cars and flips burgers does. And, you know, whether that's going to change the mindset and, you know, whether there's going to be internal competition among and between the different, Olympic and non-Olympic sports, whether or not the record keeping that compares us to our Big Ten peers or the SEC or other conferences produces a different type of competition, we're just going to have to see. The idea is to make it as transparent as possible and capped at that $22.5 million.
Go back to AAU for a second. You're chancellor at UNMC. How do you think that helps you when you're having this discussion and trying to get us back in the AAU?
Well, you know, most of the members of the AAU, about 57 out of the 71, have large academic medical centers as part of their university system, as we do. The only difference is we report them separately, because in 1968, when the system was created, each of the university entities, campuses as we now call them, were separate campuses. They were reported separately. And so starting last February, we started reporting them together. And that elevated our rankings in research and sponsored programs from about 120th to about 60th in the country. So that's a big change, and that's just as simple as combining reporting. So when we start to look at other things that we can report together, the role of the accrediting bodies and other entities of that nature, that'll give us a better idea of what it would take for the AAU to look at us as a single entity as opposed to 4 separate campuses.
How unique is this situation in terms of being a member institution that's been removed and trying to get back in? And how important is it when you look at your other peers in the Big Ten, the other 17 members are all in the AAU, and to get back in, to join back up at the same level with them?
Well, as you said, the other 17 members of the Big Ten are all longstanding members of the AAU. We are the only institution, to the best of my knowledge, that was actually dismissed by the AAU. Several have withdrawn rather than be dismissed. And if we are successful, in air quotes here, we will be the first to ever regain entry. And by the way, it's not an application process where you fill out the form, click send, and they know you're interested. It's by invitation only.
Dr. Gold, let's talk a little bit about alcohol sales. All the Big Ten other schools are doing that now. It's announced that Nebraska will soon have that as well in Memorial Stadium. Can you tell us how that would affect, and what are we talking about in terms of revenue?
Well, the revenues are just estimates, but it looks like it's going to be a multi-million-dollar revenue source. I know Troy has worked that through very carefully as he's in the process of looking for various concessionaires who would be the professional vendors of the alcohol sales. The data, which is very important to me as a physician, is really the safety data.
Yeah.
And there were some really excellent studies. One of the most recent ones was actually done at Iowa the year before and the year after they started selling alcohol, which is predominantly beer and spritzers, let's say. And they actually showed reduced number of emergency room visits. They showed a reduced number of alcohol-related incidents in the stadium, which, by the way, just to give you a rough idea, the audience might not even appreciate this. You look at all the events that occur in a typical game, anywhere between 5 and 6%, maybe 7% are related to alcohol. And the good news is that this should suppress the binge drinking.
Right.
And that is the key to this, because that's what causes your DUIs, that's what causes your ER visits, et cetera.
Let's stick on the stadium, the Memorial Stadium. Nebraska, they were in the process of getting South Stadium redone. Obviously, that was put on hold. We talked to Troy Dannon back in May about the next step here. Where are things at with that next step? And we knew what the first one was going to cost. It was, I believe, $450 million was what was listed on the Regents meetings back then.
Yep.
I mean, what is a realistic number that you think it's going to take to do this project, at least at the first phase?
Well, I can't really give you a number because I don't know it. But I do know this, that Troy is working really hard looking at different sequences of the East Stadium, the West Stadium, the South Stadium, et cetera, scoreboards, playing field transition. You may have seen just last Board of Regents meeting, we're converting the practice fields, which will be a really big deal for us as well. But I'm hoping that Troy will have a better understanding of the sequencing, the timing, and the scope of the projects section by section, probably by this time next year, I hope, maybe sooner. I know he's got a third-party consultant that he's working with that has done a lot of important stadium work. But I think credit to Troy and the team, we need to get into this NIL settlement and have a better understanding of where we are from a cash flow perspective. We want to keep as much dry powder as we can, going into the stadium project. I mean, clearly, parts of it have to be done. Maybe even all of it has to be done. But how fast, in what sequence, time will tell.
Dr. Gold, I remember years ago, Alabama showing the increased amount of attendance, people signing up to go to Alabama when they started winning national championships. How important is the success of athletic programs, and especially football, to help the university overall?
There's no question that the success of the athletic programs in many ways are the front door to the university. But we also have to continue to compete and to win in the classroom, in the research laboratory. Let me tell you, students like to work with faculty members that are not just reading the papers in the textbooks, but that are writing them. Students like to know that there are Nobel laureates and there are highly recognized faculty members that are their mentors and their teachers and their coaches, et cetera. And so this is all a combined package around excellence. When I had my formal investiture back in early September, hard to believe it's more than a month ago, in the rotunda of the state capitol, I talked about an odyssey from excellent to extraordinary. And that's what we really need to be. And, we have every tool in the tool chest we need to do that. We have incredible loyalty of not just our fans, but of course every Nebraskan and many, many alumni. We have phenomenal facilities. We have an incredible student body. We have some of the best faculty in the world. We just need to put it all together and be rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and now with your new job, you've been around the university and the athletics a lot more and the fan base. What are your impressions of just the fan base and how big of an asset that is when you sell what Nebraska is and its value in terms of the ratings it still receives and everything it still gets at the national level?
Well, I was, with the commissioner and the president of the NCAA in the president's box during the Colorado game, and both of them said that they had never seen an experience like that. I mean, the place was absolutely alive, as you know, and every fan knows. I've been on the field for every tunnel walk since I took the job. I've hosted countless people. I usually will hop from box to box during the home games and have enjoyed doing the halftime show with Matt, which has been a lot of fun, and get to talk about interesting things. The fan base is huge and supportive in every possible way. They're financially supportive, their loyalty, their energy levels, and I think that translates into wins.
Your thoughts on Matt Rule heading up this program? Obviously, the football part is big, but he talks so much about being an educator and making sure the student athletes better when they leave here in their future. Your thoughts on having him as the head coach?
I think he's a rock star. I recently had an experience that would never make the headlines or the media, but I'll tell you just very briefly. He called me about a student athlete whose family was having a medical issue, and he wanted some advice and some connections in order to make some decisions about when the student should be back to be with his family and that kind of thing. And this was not just the conversation of a coach. This was a conversation of almost like a parent who has had incredible compassion for the student and really wanted to be sure that he was doing the right thing at the right time for this young man. It was impressive to me, but I'll tell you, every interaction I've had with Matt has been just like that.
Yeah. Let's talk about your game day routine. You mentioned jumping around with boxes. Is there a tailgate you go to? Is there a favorite thing you eat in Memorial Stadium? What's your game day like?
Well, I always do the President's Tailgate, which is really cool. We have 600 of our closest friends.
Yeah.
And what we've done this year is we've combined the Chancellor's Tailgate, the Athletic Director's Tailgate, and the President's Tailgate. So it is like massive energy level. And then I hop over to the stadium, usually take a group of people down for the tunnel walk and stand on the field and say hi to a lot of friends, and then pop up to the President's box, usually for the first half. I typically take down at least one runza, maybe a little bit more than that, and then do the halftime show, usually with Matt, and then usually spend most of the second half going from box to box, meeting with friends and colleagues and others.
One last one from Sean.
I'm curious, have you been able to really tour the new football facilities and in your thoughts on just seeing those, and do you get a chance to show a lot of your colleagues the new football facilities?
It is absolutely amazing. I have taken a tour. I actually had the opportunity to speak at the ribbon coating with T.O. and with others, and I can't believe there's a finer facility anywhere.
Dr. Gold, we really appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us.
It is my pleasure. Have me back sometime.
No doubt, definitely.